please give it up for Dr. Jean Jaubert.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, let me say that I am happy and proud to speak in front of you today. I wish to express my warm thanks to Dr. Kevin Erickson, who invited me to come. Also, I was very happy to meet with old friends such as Julian Sprang, Tom Frakes, and also I was very happy to meet with Jake, who I met for the first time in Singapore several years ago. Well, I'm going to say something about my system. So what is an ecologically balanced aquarium? An ecologically balanced aquarium is a mini or micro captive aquatic ecosystem within which, as in nature, the interaction that takes place between the living things and the surrounding physico-chemical environment generate dynamic equilibrium that will maintain the clarity and the purity of the water. So my talk will consist of two parts. First part, a few historical notes. When I was a young boy, 70 years ago and more, the more or less intuitive implementation of the natural rules of nature were the only means to set up and balance a closed-circuit aquarium. In 1950, my uncle offered me a freshwater aquarium. It was my 9th years old anniversary gift. At that time, the technological environment was radically different from that of the present world. We had no telephone, no refrigerator, no television, no computers, no plastics. And in the place where I was living, Oran in Algeria, the running water available from the tap was brackish. And this is the reason why, to set up a freshwater aquarium, we had to purchase water in the street in these conditions. This is a schematic representation of my first aquarium. It was equipped only with one air pump, and with a layer of humus, and another layer of quartz sand and plants, and that's all. My first contact with the underwater world took place in 1951. I read the book of Jacques Cousteau, and also I saw his first film in black and white, 18 meters deep, and at that time I was 10 years old. And this is how I set up my first marine aquarium in 1955. This aquarium was made of glass molded aquarium, and I was setting up exactly the same way I was setting up a freshwater aquarium, but with live sand collected in the mud, live stones collected in the mud, and Colerpa prolifera to produce oxygen, and just a small air pump, nothing, and it was working well. And this is a photo shot in 1955 with a cardinal fish, and you can see also the Colerpa prolifera here, that was growing in the tank. Another photograph with a more elaborated tank in 58. And the proof, is that at that time, I exchanged in 1958 letters with the director of the Marine Lab of Castiglione in Algiers. This letter in the paper of the General Government of Algeria. And you can read here what Joseph wrote. You have a photo of the red cardinal in your marine aquarium. Did you set up this aquarium in Oran? Please let us know. Do you use a bell-bull pump, the pressure compressor, air compressor, or can you make frequent water changes? In 1959, during holidays in France, I met with Monsieur René Coutan. René Coutan was manufacturing tanks especially designed for seawater in a small shop situated in the city of Saintes. At that time, there was no plastic, and the tank was made of fiberglass reinforced concrete. The glass were sealed with a kind of black rubber, and the aquarium was containing an internal filter made of glass wool and activated charcoal. And at that time, in 1959, Coutan was selling a small booklet in which you can read the point, filtration, a big question that will cause much ink to flow is that a filter is not indispensable in a well-balanced tank. However, I advise that beginners use a filter. All of the filter at that time function with air-supplied air pumps. During the same period, in Indonesia, Li Xin'eng, a Chinese man, was keeping live coral and vertebrate in tanks with live stones, more or less like the Coutan aquarium. But and he published in 1961 a paper in TFH, Tropical Fish Hobbyist. But at that time, the rudimentary state of the international communication means resulted in the fact that, at least in France, hobbyists ignore this fact. I didn't know that Li Xin'eng had made this thing. But many, many years later, I had uncovered that, in fact, at least in the Western world, the concept of ecologically balanced aquariums is at least 170 years old. The first pioneers who had the idea of keeping together live rocks with algae and marine animals in well-illuminated glass balls were Ward, Johnson, Mrs. Stein, Mr. Goss, and Mr. Lloyd, and also Lancaster in 1856. These are drawings of these balls containing marine life. And you can see, that the ball contains algae, live rocks, deep sand dead, and scavengers. 1856. William Alfred Lloyd had a shop in London where one could purchase and carry small glass balls aquarium which were populated and balanced. Sample of the sentences that one could read in the Lloyd publicity in the newspaper Notes and Query 1857, the discovery of a mode of readily making artificial seawater gave large facilities. This man was making artificial seawater at that time. Thus, the permanent maintenance of a collection of living marine animals and algae in a stable state of domestication is rendered far more easily attainable matter than even the cultivation of flowers. To render this yet more practicable in the hands of an experienced person, Mr. Lloyd makes it a point to keep in stock a number of small portable aquaria ready stocked and with the balance properly adjusted. It's unbelievable. And in fact, Lloyd just implemented the principle that Philip Henry Goss described in his book, two books, one in 1854 and the second, the handbook, in 1855. And again, this is what you can read in this book. The rocks, the crannies, the pools are studded with various seaweeds, and these, under the daily stimulus of light, produce a vast quantity of oxygen, which, by the action of the waves and currents, is diffused through all parts of the habitable sea and maintains the health of its countless swarms of animals. In an aquarium, we seek to imitate this chemistry of nature. Another sentence, page 9, the free access of light to the plants is indispensable, and therefore that situation is the best where the sun's rays fall most freely on their leaves. It is beautiful to see the thousands of tiny globules forming on every plant and even all over the stones. These globules of pure oxygen, eliminated by vegetation under the stimulus of light, are the vivifying principle of lights. The previously mentioned reference proved that in the middle of the 19th century, several scientists and amateurs knew very well how to use sunlight, live rocks, and live sand and seaweeds, as well as scavengers, to balance a closed-circuit marine aquarium. These persons were keeping ecologically balanced tanks 100 years ago, before that Li Xin-Heng, René Coutan, and myself thought that in the middle of the 50s, they had invented the ecologically balanced aquarium. So now a few words about my aquarium during the period 1968 to 1980. In 1968, lecture at the University of Nice, I investigated the effect of light on the distribution of benthic animals, and I set up marine aquariums equipped with undergravel filters in order to overcome the problem of ammonium and nitrate accumulation. In 1970, I investigated coral reefs in Madagascar and bring back a colony of Galaxia fascicularis in the photo. But this colony kept in my lab decayed in a few months and died, overgrown by filamentous algae. This because the tank, equipped with one undergravel filter, contained too much nitrate and phosphate. In 1973, Jacques Cousteau asked me to set up live aquariums in the Monaco's museum. This is what I did. But again, this aquarium was working with the undergravel filter, and the accumulation of nitrate and phosphate was killing the corals and resulting in a proliferation in a swarm of filamentous algae. In 1979, I was investigating coral reef in the Red Sea, in the Gulf of Aqaba, exactly. At that time, no one was able to keep corals in a lab in good state, to investigate it. So I decided to bring the lab on the seafloor. And I designed all of this equipment, and the technology was consisting in enclosing the pieces of coral, stones, sediment, and so on, in perspex domes, transparent perspex domes, and measuring pH variation, oxygen variation inside during 24 hours. And from this measurement, it was able to understand how much photosynthesis the coral was producing, how much respiration he was needing, and so on. And when I was doing this, of course, to separate the effect of the stone, of the coral, of the sediment, I put the dome over a piece of sediment without anything. And I was also investigating the effect of nitrate on the photosynthesis of the coral. And I was very much surprised to uncover that the nitrate was disappearing in the dome. So I was extremely surprised, and I decided to investigate this. And the first thing I did was to investigate the literature. And I uncovered something that the marine biologists knew very well, the existence in the hypoxic or anoxic part of the sediment of denitrifying heterotrophic bacteria that are cutting the molecule of nitrates to take the oxygen and release nitrogen. So after a few, maybe weeks, suddenly I had the idea to apply this to my aquarium in my lab at the University of Nice. And at that time, you see, this is what happened. I have a big tank in my lab, 2,000 liters, which was full of filamentous algae, full of Aiptasia. The coral were dying. And what I did, this aquarium was just working with one airlift that was pumping water under the gravel. It was under a gravel filter. That's the reason why the nitrate and phosphate were accumulating in the tank and the coral were dying. What I did, I just disconnected the airlift. So I disconnected the under gravel filter and let it like this. And after a few months, all the coral started to revive, to grow, and so on. This is 6 years later. You see a few colonies that grew. One of one of Stylophora here, one of Acropora empricci here. So I decided to present a paper in the second International Congress Symposium to describe this system. This Congress was organized by Jacques Cousteau, who at that time was the director of the Monaco's Oceanographic Museum. And this is a schematic representation of the tank, which has a plenum, but not because I wanted to make a plenum, just because it was an old under gravel filter, and I just disconnected the airlift, and this is the way the waters are flowing, and a small amount of water was due to the advection phenomenon. Some water was flowing through, the sediment was a very slow rate, so that the deeper part of the sediment was staying hypoxic or anoxic. So the denitrification could take place in this part. And below, this is a reference of the paper that I published at that time. What happened is that Cousteau, in the address, the opening address of this International Aquarium Symposium, said something about this system which was completely new, and many people that were attending the symposium came to my lab in Nice to see the tank. So this is what I'd say, that the sentence of Jacques Cousteau had a great impact on the audience of the Second International Aquarium Congress. Many persons came to Nice to visit my lab and see the tank. Amongst them was Tom Frakes. Sometime later, Tom spoke about this tank in MACNA, and I had the visit of Julian Sprung. Both, I think, I'm not sure, called the system JAUBERT, not me, JAUBERT natural nitrate reduction, and used the term of plenum that I didn't know before. So this is now the second part, how this system works. So the system called Deep Sand Bed, DSB, described 10 years later, after this first paper, is nothing but one of the different ways to implement the JAUBERT NNR system. And I'm going to present the result of a few experiments. This is the one experiment tank. Gross volume 30 liters, free water volume 15 liters, no filter, no skimmer, no calcium reactor, just a small steering pump. It contains soft coral, hard coral, and this is the equipment I was using. This is one oxygen meter manufactured by the German company Presence. It is a 4-channel oxygen meters which work with optical sensors. And the results are recorded on this PC. And here you can see the sensors in place. One of them in the sediment, one of them another at the interface of the water and sediment, and the third one in the water. You see a close-up view, and you see this is the spot which is glued in the water against the glass of the aquarium. And this is a schematical representation of the device, This is the aquarium glass, water, sediment. This is the spot. And this is a fiber optic, an adapter. And the fiber optic sends a light to the sensor, and the sensor responds, and the response is proportional to the oxygen content of the. And this is very important, because this sensor doesn't consume oxygen at all, which is completely different to all other kind of sensors that consume oxygen. Why it is important? Because the pore water in the sediment, the pore water which is against the sensor, flows very, very slowly. So if the sensor consumes oxygen, it modifies the content of oxygen of the pore water, while the sensor doesn't consume oxygen at all. So you have a true measurement of the oxygen content of the pore water. And this is what I found. This is the sensor is 1 centimeter below the sediment water interface. As soon as the light is switched off, the oxygen content decreases to something like 2%. So the layer becomes hypoxic. And then when the lights are on, and the oxygen content rises to 282%, almost 30%, 300%, of saturation. So this is the proof, something I was anticipating, that the surface layer of the sediment is super oxic. So it is important because it enhances the transformation of organic matter into ammonium, and also ammonium into nitrate. This is what happened in the water, at the water interface. Same thing, but the minimum when the lights are switched off is 80% of saturation. This is a view of the system and the very complex, extremely complex biogeochemical processes that take place in the sediment. This is just a simple representation of these phenomena. And here I show the nitrogen cycling. The organic matter is transformed by bacteria into ammonium, and the ammonium into nitrate. And this takes place in the supersaturated zone of the sediment. Then the nitrate plus organic matter are transformed into molecular nitrogen, which is released to the water and then to the atmosphere. All these processes in blue are heterotrophic, which means they need organic matter. Of course here, because the organic matter is transformed into ammonium, but the denitrification here, transformation of nitrate into nitrogen, requires organic carbon. This organic carbon comes either from the water, dissolved organic matter, or from the sediment, the particulate matter incorporated into the sediment by the sediment fauna and microfauna. Another process which is important to prevent nitrate from accumulating into the sediment is anamox. Anamox is one autotrophic phenomenon that shunts the nitrification by transforming the ammonium into molecular nitrogen. This was uncovered quite recently. It was completely unknown 10 years ago. Phosphorus cycling. This is not very well understood yet. So the hypothesis is that the fact is that even after several years in my tanks, I don't have phosphate. So the phosphate should go somewhere. So I think that this must be proved. I think that the reactive phosphorus plus calcium and magnesium forms non-soluble precipitates in the water, also in the sediment, of course. But in the sediment with iron and other metals, they form not soluble phosphorites, so that accumulate and are never transformed into reactive phosphorus. Calcium and alkalinity. Without water changes, alkalinity decreases to approximately 1 plus or minus 0.1 microequivalent per liter of water. What about the calcium? The calcium dissolves. Why? Because the respiration of microorganisms in the sediment releases carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide plus water produce carbonic acid. Carbonic acid dissolves the calcium carbonate and release calcium ions. This is a few measurements, of the evolution of calcium and alkalinity. Calcium in red, alkalinity in blue. Most of the time, the system stabilizes at 350, 380 milligram per liter of calcium, and alkalinity at 1.5 microequivalent per liter. These values are very low. However, many soft and hard corals, either soft, small polyp system as well as large polyp systems, acclimatize well to very low alkalinity and low calcium, and they grow. However, it is useful to add bicarbonate from time to time in order to raise alkalinity above 2.5 milliequivalent up to 3 or 4 MeQ equivalent per liter. This is because, this is very important, high alkalinity prevents cyanobacteria from proliferating. And this is the proof, because I read in several papers that the calcium carbonate, the rocks and the sediment did not dissolve in the aquarium, which is completely wrong. You see, this is the average growth rate of a Cereopora caliandrum colony over 2 years, period of 2 years. You know, here you see the colony in August 1960. No, sorry, 2016, and the same colony 2 years later, July this year. So the average growth rate of the Ceratopora caliandrum colony, which was 20 grams in 216, and 370 grams this year in August, which is an average growth rate of 16 grams per month without any supplementation. I never add calcium in the aquarium, in this aquarium. And now a few examples of several tanks I set up, from the smallest to the largest. You know, this is a very small one with the baby fishes, and another one at home, 30 liters. A bigger one in Monaco, 3,000 liters, with a bush of Acropora. A much larger one in Monaco, 40,000 liters, 40,000 liters, and the guy who is with his wife, just with me, looking at the aquarium, is Buzz, the American cosmonaut Buzz Aldrin. And Buzz told me, with the exception to the moon, it is the most surprising thing that I saw in my life. And this is the largest tank in Taiwan, 400 cubic meters. So to make things clear, I wish to say that I don't claim, and I never claim, that my ecological JAUBERT NNR system, as I call it, MICROCEAN, has no limit and is better than other systems. The good thing, I think, is that it is cheap and easy to maintain. With my system, any people able to set up and maintain a freshwater aquarium can set up and maintain a wonderful reef tank. Therefore, by attracting beginners, I anticipate that my system will increase the number of marine aquarists. I also anticipate that after a while, a part of these new marine aquarists will try other more sophisticated methods, such as burn-in, and that finally, this process will benefit to the whole aquarium business. Thank you for your attention.